Welcome to Emerging Tech Mastery, a show that demystifies cutting-edge technology like cryptocurrency, the blockchain, metaverse, NFTs, virtual reality, the maker movement, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud, edge, and even fog computing. Strap in as we ride into the fourth industrial revolution. Emerging Tech Mastery provides actionable knowledge regardless of skill level from experts in the trenches. We piece together this intel in easy-to-consume media formats, processes, and procedures. See you in the future.
Tech Mastery, and I have a really interesting project and guest. His name is Jason Crowe, and he is the founder of the Qortal blockchain and Crowetic.com. Jason, thanks so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
Oh yeah, man, no problem. I always relish the opportunity to get the word out about Qortal, and I'm doing well, man. Thanks.
So you have built something super interesting, and we could literally go on for hours about all the different features. But I think it'd be cool for particularly newcomers. I want to lay some groundwork. First off, who are the Cipherpunks, and why is their work and philosophy important?
But yeah, there's a lot that goes into answering that question, but essentially they were about privacy and freedom, right? It comes down to that, and that was the original idea behind the Bitcoin white paper. Right. And it was all about bringing the power back to the hands of the people. But as you see things progress, you realize whether that was actually the intent or maybe something else might be going on, right? And that's kind of where I got to in the crypto space after seeing so many projects come and go, seeing how Bitcoin itself moved forward. And I just, I wanted to see something that actually kept true to those ideals to bring the power back to the hands of the people in every possible way, but also to lay a foundation where anything that you can think of that you use your computer for on a regular basis can be built embodying those ideals.
Yeah, they are basically like privacy hacktivists, I've heard them called. And I think, as you alluded to, they were like pre-crypto, they were just all about freedom and data privacy and not basically being the surveillance state that we are now. So they've come in and really done some amazing work that has led to the formation of Bitcoin. And we're going to get into why there's issues with Bitcoin and, frankly, most blockchains. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about the nature of the internet. There's so many centralized forces at work. You have ICANN with domains. You have internet service providers, ISPs. Now we have AWS, which most of the internet data is going through. So tell us a little bit about how the internet is controlled by centralized entities right now.
When the internet first came out, it was not built that way. It was actually supposed to be a distributed, decentralized network. You were supposed to be able to communicate directly peer to peer, right? But as time went on, as things tend to do, well, in our world anyway, right? They trended toward the people who already have large companies established, have the resources to be able to put things together, and then they wish for, we're going to say that this is going to make things easier so that they'll use this, and they get people to use things that they run. And it ended up becoming to a point now where we've got essentially a few large companies, Google, Amazon, Facebook. They basically control the entirety of what people consider as the internet. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, the internet service providers, where you now have to pay to connect to the internet. And that's basically been the case since, dial-up back in the day. And all of this is not really how it was supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be actually a true public utility wherein you can connect utilize it. You are able to get data that you need directly from another party without needing to have to pay for all these additional services and just give all of your money and anything to these centralized entities that now control everything. And now we have basically no choice in the matter. They all run the entirety of what we consider to be the internet today. And that is really one of the main things that we were looking to kind of get rid of, because personally, I don't think that that's really great. And if that's allowed to continue, we can just imagine where that will go. And there's quite a few theories as far as the exact details regarding that, but none of them really trend towards something that I consider to be good, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I always joke about how owning domains feels like we're living on a trailer park. It's like, why are you paying every month, or not every month, every year to renew your like trailer? Basically, like your little lot fees is kind of how I look at it.
Right. I mean, can you even say that you own the domain? Because you don't. You are renting it. This company just decided that it
Yep.
was the one that now controls all domains and they all have to be rented from them. And that's how it is. And so if you say you own a domain, you don't. You are the one who is currently listed as the one
Mm-hmm.
who technically owns it, but you don't. If they wanted
Yeah.
to, they could take it back from you. They could block access to it. You don't own it, right? And that's a big problem as well. Yeah, for sure.
So one thing, as you were talking about that, you kind of got me thinking, radio and like, yeah, there's a little bit of rules, like you're supposed to get licensed to be a ham radio operator and take that test or whatever. But it feels like radio, like as in like using ham radio, is more like that open system. I mean, yeah, like you don't want to like transmit, if I'm not interfere with any like critical frequencies like that are used by fire and emergency personnel. It feels like radio's more free than the internet, and like you said, it was supposed to be free to begin with, so it's kind of wild that they were able to lock that down, but luckily there are solutions coming, right?
There are solutions coming, yes. And actually, the majority of the solutions are already built into what Qortal is right now. We don't have the internet service provider specific solution quite yet, but we do have a plan for that. We even have found a protocol that will allow that to take place, and that's a really, really interesting topic. But we should just cover probably what we have already, because we have a ton to cover just on that.
Oh
But we
yeah.
do have a solution in place or in the future that we're planning on, and we're actually starting to work on it now for the replacement of the need for an internet service provider as well. We will not need that in the future either. And what you were saying with the ham radio, yeah, I personally don't have a lot of experience with ham radio. I've always kind of loved the concept. And back in the day when I was a kid, I loved CB radios, right? And so I would always, whenever I had a chance to use one, my grandparents had one in their little buggy, and I loved
Mm-hmm.
that thing, and I was always in there trying to talk to people. But yeah, you're absolutely right as far as the freedom that comes along with that. But I mean, the licensing, that's a whole other topic, and I am kind of anti a lot of that. But it is what it is, right? But once you do have that, then yeah, you have a lot of freedom when it comes to that, and that's a little bit more near what we're aiming for, but not
Mm-hmm.
quite, right? We're trying to stay literally completely away from the existing system in any sort of fashion.
Yeah, so I mean, we've jumped around, the concept of Qortal, but I did want to lay the groundwork, like what you said. Things are locked down; they're not free. It was intended to be free, but it really kind of has gotten away from that. So, how did you come up with the idea of Qortal, or how did you evolve some of the ideas that you had run across, and maybe even share a little bit about your background as an IT person, so you really understand hardware and like really how the pieces fit together. I think that's one thing that stood out to me about you and your really your group of all kinds of smart people in Qortal that are they just get it. They get how the pieces fit together, and I feel like everyone's living in like software. So yeah, how did you come up with the idea, and tell us about how your background sort of guided you as you put all this together?
So, yeah, I mean, I always loved computers since I was as young as possible. Like, to 12 years old is like the first computer that I actually had in my house came about, right? And I was born in 85, so probably older than some of the people and younger than some of the others who are going to be listening to this, but technology basically evolved during my childhood, right? There was no cell phones or anything, and then all of a sudden there were all of these things, and then I ended up with a computer in my house, and I just immediately fell in love with it. And I rebuilt that machine 6 months later as the first computer that I actually built. I took it all apart. I ended up making it not work, and then I ended up upgrading it after that and actually replaced an Intel processor with an AMD processor on the same motherboard with an adapter, which you can't do anymore, which was really, really cool. But yeah, I loved hardware ever since I was a kid, and I just kept going with that. And I actually got my first, real tech job when I was about 16. And so, yeah, I've got a ton of experience with building systems. I didn't get into more code related stuff back then because honestly, I didn't trust my younger self with that knowledge. I specifically stayed away from learning coding stuff when I was younger. I kind of wish I didn't now at this point because now I'm still, I'm teaching myself coding languages. I wish I knew a little more about that, but I was really focused on the hardware side of things because I just loved the actual computers themselves, right? And so I kept going with that. Then in 2013, I came across Bitcoin through a company I was working with, one of the developers there. It was a software company, and he pointed out Bitcoin to me. And I saw that, and I was, oh, wow, this is a whole other level of where the technology is going. And essentially, since then, I realized that blockchain technology is the only way that you can actually have systems that bring the power back to the hands of the people. But I didn't see any that did it in a way that made perfect sense to me, right? And so I was, since then, I had run multiple different teams for building different projects and led those projects as community leader or whatever, just came into them and then established myself in a role like that. I've always been the type where I can do things like that. And so I got a lot of connections with different, very intelligent people and just started bouncing ideas off of them and started kind of building loosely, I guess you would call it a team. And from there, we just were coming up with the concepts, and I am a decent writer, so I kept writing it all out. And eventually, it led to writing the first paper for the Qortal project. And we put all of these concepts together, improvements on everything we could think of in the blockchain space, and then adding a ton more functionality to all of that while still maintaining the security and the distribution and all of the other properties of the blockchain that makes it very important and crucial for actual security and freedom in the digital space. So now we've got a system today that we can do basically everything you use your computer for on a regular basis, but with the security and distributed nature of a blockchain. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah.
You have Bitcoin and you have a lot of blockchains, and you have, like, I just want to touch on, you have proof of work, which is running some kind of miner or device to process transactions, and then there's like delegated proof of stake or just regular proof of stake. So tell us a little bit about where you see blockchains going wrong and where you saw a need for improvements and evolution of this model.
There are a lot of things like that I was looking at and was talking with the people that I was dealing with about, and we agreed that, there are certain things that just aren't going to work long term, or they're going to trend towards centralization or whatever, right? So, yeah, proof of work, one of the things that you touched on is like how most, well, I guess I wouldn't say most these days, but how a lot of blockchains are powered, which when I say powered, I just mean how new blocks, which is just transactions that took place within a certain period of time, right? So people are not like super confused. I don't know how in tech or how technologically adept the people are that are going to be listening to this, but I like to kind of explain things as I talk. A block is essentially just transactions that have taken place within a specific frame of time, and then those get added together with cryptography, and that makes what's called a blockchain, right? And so to move the blockchain, to add new blocks to it, you have to have some method of powering it. And what Bitcoin and a lot of others use is called proof of work. And proof of work is a great concept. And as a proof of concept, it works amazingly. However, in reality, it doesn't play out in a fashion that trends toward true decentralization. Now, the reason for that comes down to in proof of work, the more hardware you have, the more hash rate it's called, is basically how much processor power each machine you have can get measured, and it's called a hash rate. How much hash rate you have goes up based on how much hardware you have or how fast the hardware you have is, right? So that obviously, the more hardware you have, the more influence you have over the network, the more you make, right? And so how is that any different than what already exists? The people that already have more resources are obviously going to be able to establish larger operations on Bitcoin and then basically take control of the Bitcoin network and any other coin that runs on proof of work. Now, I'm not talking negatively on proof of work. It's a great proof of concept. And in theory, it can work out. But I just see things as let's take the worst case scenario and then kind of go from there and then make something that will address those things, right? People always take it as I'm talking negatively about proof of work. Now, in some regards, yes, kind of, but I just like to see things as a whole, right? Proof of work does work. It's amazing. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. However, it can be taken advantage of by people who have more resources already, and that leads to an issue potentially, right? And I think that that can already be seen with the Bitcoin network today. If you look, how many people do you know that actually mine Bitcoin, right? How many? None? One, maybe? Not very many, huh? Yeah. That,
Exactly. Yep. And there was like
right?
that brief period of time where there was like
It's
home
gone.
miners, and it felt like that was a blip in the matrix, and it's gone. I mean, literally that whole reality is like few-year window where you could actually buy some ASICs. And just to add on to what you're saying, let's point out that the ASICs are somewhat proprietary pieces of tech where the like they've fused the like
Yeah.
code or whatever they do to the chip itself, so that thing can only do one thing. So it's almost like a wasteful creation in a way, and I hate to say that because
It absolutely is. Those things are built to do that, and that only. They cannot be repurposed. I mean, I guess you could, but it's very, very specific as far as what those chips can do. They run that algorithm, and that is what they're built to do. And so to repurpose something like that, you would basically have to rip the board apart and repurpose the board and then basically get rid of those chips. Or if you're a really, really good coder, you could potentially do something with them, but they're literally built to do that only. And so most of the time, what it comes down to is you have this one machine that does that, and they're coming out with new ones, faster ones all the time. So you end up with a brick after about 6 months, maybe a year if you're lucky, and it's not making you anything. Then it's just draining power and not making you anything. The days of the home miner are gone. I was a huge miner. I loved the concept of mining because a computer guy is obviously going to love the fact that you can run computers and make magic money, right? But yeah, was a great concept. I loved it. But immediately I saw that this was going to be a problem. And it became a problem a lot more quickly than I even expected. And so then what their solution was, right, is to come out with what you mentioned as well, proof of stake, or forget I always forget the D on DPOW or POS, sorry.
Yeah, delegated,
Yeah,
right? So you're
delegated, right? Delegated.
proxying
Yeah,
your,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of like a vote. Now it's a board
Yeah,
meeting or
and
board like a board voting situation, right?
and proof of stake overall doesn't make any sense, obviously. The more money you have, the more money you make. Literally. That is literally what it does. And I never understood that either. I think really proof of stake is not a solution to proof of work. It's really just going to be causing the same thing to happen a lot more quickly. It's literally whoever has the more money has more influence, has more ability to make money on the network, right? So it's literally directly rewarding the rich. And that is, not really the concept here. And I think that really the concept has kind of gotten lost in the woods. People just don't really even go back to focusing on why this was created in the first place. And most people now are just focused on the money aspect. That's it. And they're thinking of crypto as just a thing that they can sell then for the existing fiat currency. Now, that is also not what this was all about. Making money was not what this technology was built for. Yes, Bitcoin was built to be money, it was not built to make more US dollars. It was built to replace the US dollar system. It was not built to be an enhancement to it. And that's how I always explain what Qortal is as well. Is people say, "Oh, it's an enhancement to the internet." No, it's a replacement for the internet. It's the same idea as Bitcoin, but it applies it to a lot more than just the financial side of things. But yeah, we also do not use proof of work and we do not use proof of stake because of those reasons. We do not want one specific group of people that has a larger amount of resources than someone else to be able to come in and basically influence the project solely because they have more resources than someone else. It's literally about putting the power back into the hands of. Yeah, I mean, really, it's not about money. Yes, Bitcoin is about replacing the monetary system. It's not about who has more money now, and those are the ones who are going to be able to have more money in the future. How does that make any sense? That's really not what this is all about. Or at least it's not what it should be about, right? And I feel like that's where basically every so-called crypto project, and I don't even like to call Qortal a crypto project because of that. I feel like that's where it's all kind of gone wrong is everyone now just looks at crypto as basically
Mm-hmm.
another
Yep.
stock, right? Most people don't even consider it in terms of what they can do to generate it because they know that in order to generate it, you either have to have a lot of coin or and a really fancy computer for or something like Ethereum, where when I first checked, which was a long time ago, right when it first came out, you had to have a machine with like 128 gigs of RAM just to run a node, a full node, which is crazy, right? How are they expecting any normal person to run a node? The answer is they're not. And that's what I came down to is it's all just trending back to what we already have now, which how is this an improvement? It's just rebuilding the same thing we have now on an unstoppable infrastructure. How is this better? This doesn't sound better to me. Yeah,
Right.
that's why we didn't do
So
that.
So yeah, what did you end up doing? Because you, as you've said on your website, you're a custom creation, custom coded. I think you had mentioned there was another project that you somewhat inherited, but you ended up basically rebuilding it. So tell us about how you did that and like what you came to as far as like algorithm or consensus algorithm and how you handle that transaction processing and minting.
Yeah, for sure. And I was actually just right before we jumped on this call editing the wiki, which is the wiki.qortal.org, where it's a repository of information for the project. I was actually editing the minting page because we hadn't edited it in a while. And so, yeah, but yeah, we decided on a new method that didn't exist before, which means it took quite a while to both come up with the concept and then have an actual working prototype built. This project has been in development for a very long time. Myself, I've been working on it, like I said, just about 10 years, and others have been working on it on and off for roughly the same amount of time. We've got developers all over the world who have contributed to the project in one way or another. There are actually 18 founders who actually have a founder account on the platform. There are 18 of those, and there are multiple contributors that have contributed over this 10-year period. What we ended up doing is building our own. And this is, we have basically built our own everything. Like you said, yes, we did start with the foundation from the Aura project, but didn't really start with the foundation of it. We literally just used some transaction types from it and gutted everything else. Everything now has been completely rebuilt, from the database layer to the networking layer to literally everything. Qortal was a cool concept executed horribly. And I was leading another project at the time, and then came across Qortal because actually we did the world's first real trustless cross-blockchain trade between the project that I was working on at the time called Burst and Qortal. Now, we didn't get really any notoriety for this, of course. We also had the first blockchain in the world that was running what you would consider smart contract, be able to execute transactions automatically. Now, our smart contract system is completely different than the one that Ethereum uses, and that is also done with intent. But yeah, we had the first blockchain in the world that actually ran smart contracts. We had the first blockchain in the world that actually did a real cross-blockchain trade with no tokens in the middle, no third party at all, literally from one blockchain directly to another. And we still utilize that technology now in the Qortal trade portal to do trades with Bitcoin, Litecoin, Digibyte, Dogecoin, Ravencoin, and Pirate Chain. We still use that same cross-chain trade technology. I'm getting a little bit off track, but what we did, instead of doing proof of work or proof of stake, we created our own. And what we call it is minting. And now this term is also kind of what I consider bastardized by a lot of other projects, a lot of them being Ethereum token nonsense. And they consider minting to be clicking a button that creates more tokens. And that is not at all what minting is on Qortal. What you could say, as far as a lot of people to call it proof of this, proof of that, right? What you could call minting proof of contribution over time, and memory proof of work. We do utilize a proof of work in our consensus, but we do not use proof of work in the same fashion. We have a memory-based, RAM-based. Your machine has RAM for storing active things that you're working on right now, right? And then storage for storing it long term. Now, the memory, or RAM, we use that with the memory-based proof of work, and it only takes 1 megabyte of RAM. Instead of doing what proof of work on blockchain or on coin does, it has a difficulty that changes based on how much hash rate is being used on the network at that given time. We don't use proof of work like that. We say this proof of work algo has a set difficulty that every single minter has to create a nonce by hashing this algo at this difficulty to get a result. Then they submit that with their minting signature to prove that they did the work, right? Now, that difficulty doesn't change. It stays the same. And all the memory proof of work on Qortal in regard to the consensus does is make it so that one physical computer can only run a certain number of what we call minting keys, which is what you need to have assigned to your node in order to submit a minting signature and become a minter, right? You can only have a certain number of those minting keys assigned to your node in order to be a minter. Right? We made it like that so that we could limit how many minting keys could be assigned to a single node and make it so that that could still be part of consensus verified by the rest of the node network. And we do have that proof of work there, but essentially what minting is just proving your contribution over time. That's it. You have a node running, that node is synchronized with the rest of the node network, and you're saying, I'm here by submitting a signature every there's a time window, right? So it happens, I think, every 30 minutes right now. That's going to be getting modified in the near future, but that's how it goes. So you submit saying I'm here, and that's all there is to it. So as long as you've got your node running and submitting minting signatures, which means you just have your node on and you have your minting key assigned to it, that's it. So you're just proving basically how long you have been a minter. And as you do that, you get another block minted with every block that your node is considered online for, right? As your blocks minted increase, your level increases. As your level increases, your influence over the network in terms of the voting system and your reward that you get from each block. And the block reward comes from both the newly created court that's getting created into the system and the transaction fees that have taken place during that block, right? All the transaction fees and all the newly created court get split between every minter based on their level evenly. The way we do that is we have each two levels, levels 1 and level 2, levels 3 and level 4, levels 5 and level 6, they're considered a tier. Level 1 and level 2 is tier 1, right? Each tier splits the reward evenly of a certain percentage of the overall. And that percentage increases as you level up. Each new tier you get into, you share the reward with the next tier of minters, and they share it evenly. It's as fair as it can possibly be based on how long you've been supporting the network already. Minting is less about trying to be the one to actually sign the block and a lot more about just contribution, right? And it doesn't matter if you have it assigned to one node or you have your minting key assigned to 15 nodes. It doesn't matter. That eliminates the competition and it eliminates the ability to buy more power.
Yes. Oh man, this is crazy. That was a really good breakdown, by the way. So, like, the craziest thing that stands out to me about this is I feel like that's you've actually modeled and mirrored more of the social dynamic of what I've seen in these developer communities. It's like you kind of have like, oh, they're OGs. They've been here since 2010 when Bitcoin first came out, and so it's really interesting how you sort of, like I said, mirrored what seems to already be happening socially. And I would argue that developers who have that GitHub, contribution from 2010 are going to get more respect. Forget about blockchains, forget about crypto. Just socially, I'm going to take that person seriously. And I think anyone else who understands, like, oh, wow, like, no, they really were contributing for a long time is going to also take their opinion seriously. So it's funny how you've sort of taken that social concept and baked it into your system. And it's kind of interesting because even those 18 founders, like, if they say stopped contributing, it's like you can almost like I don't know if like you get penalized for not contributing, but in a way it's like kind of like, some of these founders, was it Palmer Luckey or whatever for Dogecoin, basically bailed. So now it's like, well, who runs Dogecoin? It's like, well, whoever those core developers are that are pushing on GitHub. So it actually feels like you made a more natural system, not just transaction wise, but also socially, like how these groups operate normally, right?
Yeah, that's literally exactly it. We wanted to have, and it's not like a hierarchy. It's literally what you were saying. It's more like who has been contributing to the project longer. And so this also leads to where you can, at a glance, look at an account and see how long that they've been contributing, as long as that account is a minter. Now, we limit the creation of minting accounts so that we can attempt to have one minting account per individual, right? And so, yes, this does lead to one game, and there's one potential game that can be played on Qortal, which unfortunately was taken advantage of, and we had to build a way to deal with that a little sooner than we expected, but we did do that. And we are going to run that for the second time in the near future, but I don't want to get into all that right now. But yes, self-sponsorship is obviously the one game that can be played, and we knew we would have to come up with a solution for that. But essentially, what we're doing is we're creating a way for humans to do the verification involved to create a new minter into the system. As you reach level 5, that's when you, as a level 5 minter who's been contributing for at least, it's usually averages out to about a year and a half, a little bit longer, to get the number of blocks minted required to get to level 5. Now you, as someone contributing, can now create a new minter into the system. And the whole idea behind that is you were to invite your friends that you know are real people, your family that you know are real people, and people who are going to want to make use of this system, and make them into minters as well. And then the same process continues over time. It keeps going, right? So yeah, you're exactly right. I liked the way that you pointed that out. That was good. I haven't heard anyone mention it like that. So that was really cool. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
You know, you've got a lot of, sounds like, friends in high places, if you will. So you've known a lot of devs. So yeah, it's really cool, like how you've sort of taken kind of the best ideas. And here's another idea I think you guys have done that we haven't touched on, but I know I'm going to get you going pretty good on this one. But specifically, how do most blockchains handle data, and how have you built Qortal differently? Now, I'm going to throw some hints. Blockchain bloat, putting everything on chain, putting, things like that. Tell us about what you've seen and how you guys have actually done some very interesting and novel things to use the tech, but in a different way. Like picking up from what you said about the signatures, it's like there's something different going on and it's not as heavy, but I want you to explain why that's the case.
Yeah, no, that actually was one of the major flaws with the Quora project. They had web hosting and it was really cool, but they put all of the data on the blockchain. Now, the problem with that people may not see immediately, right, is that if you put all of the data on the blockchain, then every single node that's considered a full node, which means that they have all of the chain, right? They have the entire chain, they have all of the history. They have to then have all of the data for every single website that gets published. Now, if you look at that for 5 seconds, you can probably realize that that's not going to work long term, right? How does this make any sense? And that is what they're still doing with the Oracle things on Bitcoin now that they're doing, where they're making NFTs and they're putting them actually on the blockchain, because Bitcoin was not built to store data. It was built to be a coin, and that is what it does, and that is all it can do, in my opinion. Now, people are trying to make it do more because the blockchain is a functional thing, right? But trying to put the data on the chain is just going to make it so that you can't run a full node, or you can, but you have to have a ton of data and you have to be able to continually expand that data. And it leads back to, again, where, only data centers can run full nodes, right? No, we can't do it that way. That makes no sense. And so that was one of the main issues with the Quora project that I personally was, nope, that has to go. That, and of course proof of stake, and a lot of other things that they did, in my opinion, completely incorrectly. And obviously, if I look at it from a conspiratorial fashion, I can think, well, maybe they did this on purpose because they wanted to just be a quick project. They just wanted to make money off of it, da da da. But I'm like, but it was built from scratch. Why would they do this like this? I don't know, right? It's odd, and I was not part of the original Quora team, obviously, or I would have pointed these things out to them and probably ruined their day. But yeah, we make sure that we do not put the data on the chain. But then you're like, oh, okay, how does the chain help at all, right? What we do instead is we take that data and we do what's called hashing it, which, if you are familiar with when you are downloading something on like a developer website and it says MD5 hash or SHA-256 hash or whatever, right? And it shows you a string of digits. That's what a hash is. It literally just takes and makes a stamp of that file. And so you can see if that file is the original file or if it is a modified version of that file. So you can say, okay, then I'm not going to download this because it's not the original, because it wasn't the same hash as the one that the developer published. And with that concept, you can then say, okay, let's take all of the files that are getting published and hash them all, and then just store the hashes on the chain, right? Because the hash is just a little string of digits that's really small, and it takes no actual storage space, but yet it can still verify the file, right? That's what we do. But then our amazing core developer, Cal, he took it even further and said, well, why do we even need to store all the hashes? Why don't we just store one hash? Instead, what we do is we take and hash every single file. Then we throw all of those hashes into a list, which is another file itself, and then hash that one file, which is a list of the hashes of all of the files, and store that one file on the chain. So it makes it even smaller, one single hash. That's it. Then, if that one single hash changes, that tells the system that one of the hashes under that has also changed, right? That one hash file can then secure the entire namespace. And that's what we do on Qortal. And we have what's called the Qortal Data Network, which is essentially a separate, distributed, decentralized, encrypted, and chunked data network that runs alongside the Qortal chain as part of the Qortal core. It's not a separate thing, but it is kind of, because it's not part of the actual blockchain, right? It is a separate data network that runs and in the Qortal core as part of the Qortal core and is secured by the Qortal blockchain by way of that hash methodology that I just explained. It makes it so that we do not have to worry about the chain itself getting to a massive size to where only data centers can now run full nodes. And not only that, like I said, our developers are absolutely incredible. They blow my mind on a regular basis. Literally every other day, I'm going, holy crap, how did they do this? And so what we have done with the blockchain itself on Qortal that I have not seen really any other chain do is we have what we call Archive v2, which makes it, and we had Archive v1 obviously, but now this is the second version. It makes it so that we can put out a full node database that with over 3 years of blockchain data in a file that ends up being just 5 gigabytes. Now, if you know how large the Bitcoin blockchain is, and that is just a coin that does nothing else except for be a coin, right? If you know how large that blockchain is, then you're going to say, holy crap, 5 gigabytes to run over a 3-year-long chain is absolutely crazy, right? It's so small. Maybe you can run that on anything. Who doesn't have 5 gigs of space? I have more than that on my phone, right? A lot more on my phone available. But you can run a full node on pretty much any device and with a really small amount of storage space. Now, obviously, if you want to store a lot of actual data on that node, you're going to need a little bit more space. But the blockchain being so small allows us to keep the node being able to run on everyday users' computers. And that's the whole idea, right? We don't have crazy proof of work that keeps running and running and running on, makes your CPU super hot all day long. No, you can run this on your normal computer that you use on a regular basis, and you can still use your computer for the things you use it for on a regular basis. You don't have to worry about your computer getting too hot. You just have to have it on. That's it. And so Raspberry Pi 4 is about the smallest device that will run everything on the Qortal network. Now, obviously, it won't run as quickly as a super fast Intel whatever, right? But it will run the chain. And that's what we're looking for, is we're being able to allow anyone to take part, right? That's what bringing the power back to the hands of the people looks like. And now in the future, we do want to be able to have this running on phones. And actually, it can do it now, but it's not super simple to set up at this moment. But you have installed Qortal on a desktop, right? How easy was that?
Oh yeah. Oh, it was incredibly easy. I mean, I was telling you, oh, it's kind of like downloading a wallet, and you're like, yeah, but it's so much more than that. You're running the whole thing. And so I kind of came to the realization that's so easy, and it almost is so easy that I was confused almost of how easy it was.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it wasn't that easy, right? We have done a lot of work to make sure that it was that easy. And it used to be where users for Mac and Linux would have to use the terminal. There was no way that they could even set up the Qortal core without using the terminal. Now, it's literally to where you set up just that one application, and then it goes, would you like to do this? You say yes. Would you like to do this? You say yes, and it's done.
Yep.
And that's it. And we want to have it that easy on phones too in the future, but we're not quite to the phone side of things yet. But what we have on the desktop side is years ahead of anyone else in so many ways.
And I didn't know it was 5 megabytes. I guess I thought it might have been 20, but
No, gigs, yeah, for the chain itself, yeah. Well, yeah, it changes, right? It starts at 5 and it will increase, but then it keeps itself within about 5 and 20. And so it will not get
wow.
any
Okay.
larger than that unless you've got where the maintenance isn't running correctly. And in that case, all you have to do is delete the DB folder and then start it again, and it'll bootstrap you and it'll start you back at 5 again. We've made this really, really easy in every possible way, and it will keep itself and maintain itself within that range. And it's absolutely crazy what it can do with taking it and doing this archive method. It saves itself in flat files, right? But those flat files are
Mm-hmm.
usable as if they were still part of the chain. The way that he did this is crazy. So you could
Mm-hmm.
still call older data that has been archived, and it will respond as if it were just not archived. It blows my mind. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I want to dawdle on that for just a second, and then I definitely want to touch more on the like
Yeah.
QDN, and because you've got all this stuff within stuff, which is pretty cool. That using the hashes or the signatures, it still preserves the data integrity. I think that's what's so cool about that
Yep.
approach, right? Is that I don't know why these other chains, and part of it is probably what you alluded to earlier, like people are making money processing transactions. Why wouldn't you stuff more crap in the transaction? It actually benefits, like it's almost like giving yourself work. And I've heard of, I think it was Nick Szabo said, Bitcoin is an artificially expensive
Right.
database. So hearing your discussion is like, oh crap, like it doesn't need to be so big. And it's almost like because there's this commercial mining movement behind a lot of these coins, it's like they don't want to make it efficient, frankly, is kind of my
Yeah.
take. So you guys are showing what's possible. And so have you found that approach you're talking about is as good as, or maybe
Way.
better, right? Because it's lighter, you're still getting the same so-called, data authenticity, secure network, but you're not having to expend like you said, buy like a data center or hard drive or fill your room with hard
Right.
drives,
And what you're doing
at
instead,
all.
right, is you are actually, if you want to store that data itself, of course, you still need to have the space to store the data, but the chain doesn't take on that additional data. That's the thing. So you're not putting it on every single full node. And with a system like Qortal, every single user runs a full node. If you store it on the chain, then every single user, and which is everyone, all of the users on Qortal run a full node. It's just how it goes. We did it that way on purpose because that's the only way to be truly decentralized. If you're not running your own node, how can you say that this network is decentralized, right? And that's the problem with Bitcoin and all of these others, where it gets to a point where only the nodes that are hosted for other people are usable, because you can't run your own node, right? And so that defeats the entire purpose
Mm.
of a distributed network, decentralized distributed network. It kills it completely. Yeah, that is the main thing, right? We have to
Mm-hmm.
be able to keep running full nodes on every machine. Otherwise, it's not decentralized.
Right. And I think there's one thing I think you had mentioned in a previous interview, which is if you wanted to do more advanced stuff, you would, like you said, essentially invest in your own
Right.
hardware, but that doesn't affect the whole chain and force the whole chain to take that load. Because I think a lot of the stuff you guys are doing with that old
Right.
system of everything being on chain, it wouldn't work, right? Because it would be too big. There's like, it's just insane, honestly, to think about like, why are you slowing it down when it could not even be like that? So you guys came up with a way to make it faster, lighter.
It's just really comes down to keeping the decentralization. Because yeah, we could. I mean, the argument could be made. Oh, who cares about the size? Storage is cheap. Okay, fine, right? Whatever. But it comes down to the fact that does matter, because not everyone has the ability to run a full node, and that's what it comes down to. And you need to have that ability. If you don't have the ability to run a full node, then you're not accessing it in a decentralized fashion. If you're not accessing it in a decentralized fashion, then it's not a decentralized network.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the big problem.
I totally remember, like, as we're talking here, I'm like, oh my God, all that mIRC days, Warez. I don't know if you remember all that, but like, I mean, dude, there were people
Oh yeah,
seeding the market, and like, of course, I was being a total, like, I can't remember the term, like a
a
leech.
leech.
Thank you. I was very leechy, and it was like, this is kind of that same thing. Like, if everyone's just taking from the network and not providing, then all of a sudden one day it's like, oh crap, where's that video I was trying to get her that I got 3/4 of
Yeah.
this game. Where's the rest of it? Dang it. Oh, well, that's because
Yep.
there's not enough people providing that service, I suppose, that data service. So like it's kind of weird to go back to those old memories from the 90s and realize that's still kind of playing out in a really interesting way. But and it's like now there's like money involved and data, and like it's getting really strange because you have people that are kind of taking and like you said, as a default, we're all serving this chain by running a node, and you made it so easy and quiet and like almost like you forget about it that it's like built in, right? And it's so funny because I feel like everyone would do that because that's what you do, like that you just run it. Whereas I was
Right.
thinking with mining, like in the earlier days, like even stuff like Ethereum, it's like, why do they make it so hard to mine? It's kind of weird, honestly. Like it's just strange how it was done. So yeah, this is such an interesting novel approach to like make it so everyone's running a full node. And even I've heard Bitcoin people like everyone should run a full node. And it's
Right.
like this big campaign
Because
and
that's
it's
the
like,
only
what?
way. Yeah. I mean, that's the only way you have a decentralized network. It's just how it comes down to. If you're communicating to any computer outside of your own, other than the synchronization, obviously, because that needs to happen. But if you're communicating to do transactions and to make things happen on the network outside of your own computer, then you are reliant upon whatever you are communicating with. If you are reliant upon anything else, it's not decentralized. That's how it
Hmm.
comes down to. If you have to use another node to make transactions, then you're doing it in a centralized fashion. And that's why they say run a full node, because that is the only legit way to do it. It's that
So I
simple.
think you laid some incredible groundwork here because it's like, okay, here's this sort of really light, really fast chain, but then there's all like it's crazy how much we've discussed and we still haven't even talked about some of the
I know.
craziest features. But I appreciate the discussion because now it's like we can kind of in our heads understand, okay, well, now I'm opening up the Qortal UI. And again, this is an audio podcast, so I'll direct people to some other videos where you actually show stuff. And, you're doing newer demos and you guys do your own sort of broadcast on Qortal, which is crazy. So I want to get a little bit into that of like, how is it from, again, we're talking QDN here, the web hosting, the sort of data side, you've got communications, you've got chats. How is that decentralized? I guess in my head, right? I'm just gonna take you through my Neanderthal brain a little bit here. If
You actually alluded to it already, and it's funny. Yeah,
no,
go
no,
ahead. I
for
want to see what
sure.
you're
But
saying.
it's like
Yeah.
part of my Neanderthal brain is like, well, what if they get shut down, or what if this fails or that fails? Like again, let's talk about like
Right.
library and like all these so-called like censorship resistant, social media, and then they get poked at. So I guess there's a little bit in my mind, and I'm kind of teeing you up here. It's like I kind of know your solutions, but I also know my question of why I'm like, well, I know other people are going to be skeptical. So I guess that skepticism
Oh yeah,
is,
totally.
well, what if you get shut down, or what if the network goes down? Like, what is the nature of how you've built it that it can live on without this whole thing in place? You've built it in a way where it's like, here's my Raspberry Pi, and here's this data I'm running on it. And if I'm not mistaken, that can live on beyond really even everyone participating today. So tell us a little bit about how that is set up and why it can actually last for a long time.
It's funny that you were mentioning the torrent network, because I got a lot of the model concepts around looking at how that functions. Now we added a lot more to it, right? Because we've got the blockchain layer behind it, and we added to where anyone who uses the data automatically becomes a peer for it, unless they have their nodes set up to not do that on purpose. The default is whenever you access any data, your node becomes a peer for it. If you don't delete that data, then you are a peer for it, right? And
Mm,
because the data network is encrypted and chunked by default, that data is all nonsense. It's all complete nonsense unless you have on that node clicked it to build it and display it. If you haven't looked at the data on the node, even if you follow it, which means that you are automatically keeping copies of it, even if you are a follower of every single name on the network, Your data on your computer, if somebody took your hard drive, they would not be able to read it. The only data that's actually readable is data that you have already viewed on that node. And if you haven't deleted that temporary copy of it, right? We've taken it and we've made the underlying data network so secure that you don't have to worry about anything like what you do with torrents, where, oh, you've got to connect over a VPN because they can monitor all the data and da 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 da, right? They cannot do that on Qortal. On the QDN network, it's not possible. You don't have to worry about any of the data at all. You can have every single node be a follower by default for anything that they view, and it's no big deal. And not only that, you can follow names, like I just mentioned, to where you will take a copy of the data that they have and any new data that they publish, and you will be a seed for them, essentially, right? You can use the terminology from torrents, it's fine. We just call it peers because that's the terminology from blockchains. If you're connected to another node, that node is considered a peer, right? And any peer that has the data or has a connection to a node within 3 hops, which just means one node to one node is a hop, one node from there to another is another hop, and one node from that one to the next one is another hop, right? It's 3 hops between them and the data. They have relay mode turned on, which is also the default, then they will get the data to you. It makes it very, very difficult to also figure out where the data even came from. It's so secure on the base level, people don't have to be concerned about the data at all. And because of that, and making it a default to where you, when you view the data, become a peer for it, most people aren't going to then go and delete that data because they don't care if they're a peer for it as long as they've got enough space for it, right? And so we've already done plenty of tests on this. So for the past, I don't remember exactly when QDN went live, but it did not go live as soon as the project went live. That was an additional development that took place later. But since that has happened, there have been multiple websites that have been published, and that node that published it has been taken off, and the data is still there. It is absolutely working exactly the way that it's supposed to. And there are also, nodes on the network that are set up to be what we call a data supernode, which is a node that attempts to synchronize every single bit of data that's on the network. Now, obviously, as time goes on, and it's already really kind of getting to that point where we've got multiple terabytes of data on the network as it sits now, it'll get to a point where being a data supernode just kind of really won't be possible. But you'll just choose which names that you like. And we didn't even cover names at all, but names on the Qortal network are essentially domains, and they're also used as usernames. You can send coin to them, or you can act as that name on certain apps, and it allows you to have a profile that can follow you from one app to another. You have one single authentication for whatever account that you're using. You can have as many accounts as you want, but you have that one single authentication point that then follows you throughout any app, any website, anything else that you access on QDN. You don't have to worry about having a billion different username password combinations and then worrying about how they're storing that data and whether that data can be hacked or not. It's all not a thing. There is no storage of any sort of private information that takes place at all. Not even when you're communicating to your own node on your own machine are you sending any sort of private information to your own node. It's all done within the one application in the UI, which does not communicate to the internet at all, only communicates to the core, which is normally on the same computer or on a computer somewhere else that you run. That's it. There's no private information that even goes there. It's all taking place in the UI itself, which does not communicate anywhere else, and that's it. The whole network is so secure, and the data network is so secure that we can make it work like this by default, and no one has any issues because they know that there's nothing to worry about. And people always go, oh, what about so-called illegal data, right? Okay, if you're worried about that, the only way that you would ever even come across it would be by literally seeking it out. And the only way it would ever be actually on your computer in a form that would be even usable at all would be if you clicked it and you went to it on purpose. If you're worried about it, you're worried about yourself, really, what it comes down to. And it's putting the power back to the hands of the people in every regard, which does also mean the responsibility is in the hands of the people as well. right?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, there's a lot that comes with this, but it's essentially the same as the way that the torrents work, kind of, right? But with a much, much better, more secure network, and every single piece of data that gets published on it is encrypted and chunked. It's literally not even just encrypted. It's nonsense, but it's also chunked up into little pieces so that it can't even be put together unless you know the formula to put it back together. Then you have to know the key to decrypt it. It's literally nonsense. If someone takes your hard drive and looks at it, they will not see any files. They'll go through and they'll see literally files of nonsense. And so, yeah, there's no way to coordinate the data that you're seeing with the data that's on the hard drive at all. And so, yeah, it's absolutely awesome the way that it all works. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm hearing like kind of intranet, but also the peer-to-peer tech. It's kind of this whole like interesting network that you can access. And like, if I'm hearing you right, essentially, as long as there's even one participant, right, running a node, it's kind of like that torrent. Oh,
Yep.
at least one person has that file. You're able to like get to it, so to speak, right? So it's really like you're using stuff that's been around, but in a whole new way that I don't think most people like even fully grasp, just because it's just so unique, you know?
Yeah, that's really been the hardest part, I think, is just getting people to understand. Because yeah, while we have utilized, similar terminology and similar things that people maybe, kind of are used to or understand a little bit, but we've done it all in a completely different way that has never been done, and there's nothing else like it at all. Even in the blockchain space, if you go and you try to look up the terminology that we use for the things that we have, it is not going to be the same. I can pretty much guarantee you that every single term that we use, it doesn't mean the same thing in Qortal as it does anywhere else, except for maybe blockchain. And even our blockchain is a completely different type of blockchain. It's actually a SQL compatible database, which is a whole other level of things that we can go into in another time, but we're not going to go there yet. But yeah, there's a lot that we can do even with just our blockchain alone, because it is actually a SQL database, which, if you know anything about SQL, you realize that that's basically what powers pretty much every application in the world. But yeah, we can do a whole hell of a lot with just that, but we don't even touch on that really yet. But yeah, we have so much potential in this platform, and we are barely scratching the tip of the surface with what we have, and we haven't even gotten into what we actually have yet as far as this conversation goes, and we're what, over an hour into it already? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We can start to certainly wind it down, but yeah, actually what I was kind of thinking was we can go into some features, and then, you can give
Yeah.
final thoughts. And I definitely was thinking maybe another episode. In fact, you kind of made me think maybe I could do my first webinar, maybe we could collaborate on that, to actually, cuz one thing with the site, I've been laying the groundwork, what is this, what is that? But dude, like, you helped me, and I appreciate the help, by the way. So, like, definitely what Rice said about, or what you said on Rice's chat about you are there to help, and you really were. So I definitely give you kudos for that. And a lot of other groups are not so
Yeah.
just open or easy to get into, we'll say. But yeah, like, maybe really quick, could you talk a little bit about what is on top of what you've laid? And again, we'll go way deeper on this. I just want to give a quick overview, and then yeah, we can close out and get you onto your day.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I didn't necessarily say that I wanted this to end. I was just saying that we've been just talking about this for a while, and we've only barely gone over some of the foundational stuff. And that's the thing, right? It just takes effort for people to kind of understand, if they want to understand to a level that that they probably should, right? And that's the hardest part, and it's been the hardest part since we launched this, and especially with, there's so much other stuff in the so-called crypto space, which again I don't like being associated with anymore, because it's just complete nonsense. Basically, they've bastardized basically every terminology. All of the terminology and every term has been completely bastardized, and now no one even really knows what one thing even means anymore. And so what I like to say is, if you have not been in the crypto space before, just don't. Just come and look at Qortal, because that's really the only so-called crypto thing that you need to look at. Because we literally have taken all of the stuff and made it better, made it easier, made it function a lot more, and put it all in one place for you. And with the Qortal UI, what you're looking at is essentially a portal. And that's the name of Qortal is just portal with a backwards P, right? With that, you're looking through a portal that gives you access to an entirely distributed, decentralized network that can do anything that you can think of. We literally have right now functionality to replace email, but much better because it's decentralized and encrypted. And not only that, it has a decentralized group messaging board that's also completely encrypted to that group on a private group. You can have a private group messaging board inside of that. That's called QMail. Then we have QBlog, and these things I'm talking about now are not actually part of the UI. They are considered Q apps. These were built on top of the Qortal data network. They're not part of the core or the UI, which those are the two main portions of Qortal. We've got the two main Git repos or code repositories for the core and the UI, and those are the two main pieces, right? Then we've got plugins that are part of the UI, and in the future we want to have the ability to have external plugins too, but that requires a lot of other stuff, so we're not quite going there yet. But anyone can come in on Qortal, register a name, which we briefly touched on. You use 1.25 Qrt to register that name, and then you actually own that name. And you actually own it because you don't have to pay for it anymore. You pay that one name registration fee, and as long as that name is unique, you own it forever. Indefinitely, right? Then you can take that name and you can use it just as a username in QChat or QMail, or you can take it and you can build an entire website on it, or you can take it and you can build an entire application with whatever functionality that you want, or both a website and an application and public and private data and all of the people who follow that name, and all of that can be sold all at once on the names market. Imagine that in the future where a company on the digital side of things has a website and their entire digital presence and all of their followers, and they can sell it all at once to someone else. And the other person doesn't have to change anything. No servers, no DNS, nothing. They buy that name and they can start editing it. It's that simple.
Yeah, you made it modular.
And that is the future of digital company sales and everything, right? That's the future of all of that. And whether we call it companies or anything, it doesn't matter, right? And so, yeah, it's absolutely crazy, man. Names are so powerful on Qortal. The first thing that you normally do when you get into Qortal is you get your account set up, which the account creation process, as you saw, was very, very simple. And we tested that at a music festival out in the middle of nowhere, gave people a phone with it on it and said, create an account. And if they were able to do it, then we knew that we did it easily enough. And we took it from there and made it even easier. And so what it comes down to is next, download backup file, finish. And that's it. Take that backup file, you make sure you have multiple copies of it because, again, the responsibility is in your hands alone. You are the only one who has access to the account that you create. It's that simple. If you can't access the account, then no one can. There's no such thing as forgot your password because there's no password. It's literally your private keys that are encrypted with your encryption password that you put on it, and that's file specific, not account specific. It's you. It's all you. Right? And so you've got that name. You can use it as a username. You can use it as a name that you publish a website on and you have people that can access it. You can even access it through what's called a gateway node, which can be accessed from the internet without anybody installing anything. Obviously, the best way to access it is in the decentralized fashion because then you're also, helping them by supporting their website when you access it because you become a peer for it and now they've got more copies of it. And then if you want to follow them, you can just search their name and follow them. And then now your node is making a copy of everything that they publish.
I don't know if you remember the game Deus Ex. I always love that game because there's like 10 ways you could get into the building. You could like kick the door down. You could go into the like air duct. You could hack the keypad. You could like trick the robot into like not noticing you or whatever, right? And I kind of feel like Qortal is very similar. It's like you could access it, like you said, through your gateway, which is sort of like what I'm understanding as our current state of the internet. It's like, that's kind of what we're doing now, right? We're accessing through ISPs and like all these other players, and you have that. Okay, I just want to go to the site. You've published your, what do you call them? Like town hall meetings, little video chat, the think tank. Thank you. I can just go to that. Like you've got your Qortal like website, and I've clicked on it several times just before I even got into all this. I could watch your videos, and like you said, maybe it's a tiny bit slower because there's a relay going on. What you're saying is if you ran your own thing,
right
now you're right there. It's like super fast because you're originating like the connection, I guess is how I would put it, versus relying on yours.
Yeah, you're not using a node that's going out and grabbing the data and then displaying it to you. So you've got the internet in between as well.
Right.
You're the one who's grabbing that data. Yes, the first time you access it, you have to download the data. But once you've got it
Hmm.
downloaded and you build it, then it's instant because it's from your computer, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I think so that kind of brings us back full circle to my question about, well, what if you guys all went away, or that this went away, that went away? And the answer is, well, just like the torrenting, right? Like if even a couple people or even one person has the file and they keep uploading or seeding, to use the old school terms, like you basically still have
Yeah.
activity, right? Because someone, it's almost like a backup. Like it's like, I almost think of it like a mushroom
Yep.
spore or something. It's like, dude, one of those spores is going to survive basically till eternity, because they're, you can't really, once there's enough sort of like dispersion, I guess, dude, those things are probably never going to go away. Like you can't ever remove like all the mushroom
Right.
spores. Like if they sort of go out in the air and get on stuff, dude, that shit's going to probably be in the ground forever.
Yeah, and we kind of did want to follow kind of a natural model, right? And that's why all the things you're saying, well, it kind of follows the natural social things, and it kind of follows the natural like that. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's exactly
Hmm.
what we were looking for, right? We wanted something that was easy and it was natural and it just fit. We wanted something that worked, right? And so, yeah, you have one node that still has that data somewhere, and it might take a little bit longer to get to you, but once it does, now you have it too, and so now you're seeding it too. And so, yeah, and not only
Yep.
that, but there's incentive to
Right.
run the node because you're obviously going to want to become a minter, right? And in the future, what we're going to do too is we're going to add incentives specifically for hosting data too. People, if they would like to, and they really want to make sure that they've got copies of that no matter what, they can pay nodes to host copies of it for them, right? That's going to be called the data market, and that hasn't come yet. But
Right.
even now, if you're a minter, you've got incentive to keep your node online. As long as you got your node, you're keeping it connected to the rest of the network. And now, whether that's connected over the internet, which it is right now, or connected over the mesh network in the future that we will be building, and we've already got the protocol figured out for that. It actually existed already, which I was really surprised about. But we're not quite to the point of testing that yet, but we're getting close. You will no longer need to use the internet service providers to get a connection to the Qortal network. You can literally just connect to nodes that are within range of whatever wireless device that you happen to be communicating with. We'll get into that point later. But yeah, you've got incentive to run that node. You're minting. You don't want to stop minting because you're getting more influence and you're getting more reward as you mint longer. One person, as long
Yeah.
as they've accessed your website and they're a minter, you've got, there's
Wow.
plenty of reasons for them to have that online. And unless they just really don't like you and they want to delete your data, nobody really goes back through and deletes all of the data that they looked at because they went to that data for a reason and they want other people to be able to go to it too, right? And since they're not worried about the data being seen by internet service providers and stuff like that because of the way that the Qortal data network is built, you don't have to worry about any of that. Why wouldn't you leave that data that you wanted to view available for others to view it?
Man, yeah, it's crazy all the stuff that's been combined to make this. And I feel like blockchain is kind of that. Basically, we're talking about game theory and incentives here. That's why blockchain trips me out endlessly, because it's like, dude, I didn't wake up and say I'm going to become like a guy that thinks like a hedge fund or an economist, like we're the Federal Reserve. But like this game theory, these incentives, these economic incentives, that's where I think blockchain really completes that, connects that final dot. Because like back to our before, mIRC, people are like seeding files, like basically even before like Napster and all that stuff, you had just people using kind of like a very simple, like it was again IRC at the time, and like people are just voluntarily running their own PC with the same principles you're discussing, not getting really anything. Like they're letting you download those games they have, those videos they have, just because they want to support the network. So back to like you said about your natural formation, it's like people just voluntarily have been running all kinds of stuff on the web for a long time. So now that you add this sort of economic layer without going too far, like back to what you said earlier about like if you make it too good, it's like kind of funny. If the rewards are too good, everyone's going to dump. I've seen it so many times. Like it's kind of weird. It's like if you want to make it a reward but not too big of a reward, because now people are like, well shit, I got thousands of dollars like hanging out, let me like sell that. Whereas if it's kind of smaller or like it's more for using the network itself, that changes I think the whole vibe. So man, there's so much stuff here we've covered. It's honestly crazy. Like
And we've barely touched it, man. And even the stuff, even if I were to go over every single thing that we have
Yeah.
in detail right now, that's still only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of what Qortal can actually do. And so, yeah, man, that's why I'm the type of person, right, where if I don't have a ton of things to do, I'm gonna be bored, right? And but with Qortal, I have one thing, right? One thing, Qortal, right? But it's everything. I can do anything I friggin' want to do and develop whatever I want to develop, any concept, any app, anything, and it can all be done on this one platform. It's combining my need to be able to do all the things into one single thing that I can focus on, and it's absolutely great, right? And so we've got an amazing community, and that's another thing that we really didn't touch on either, is that this project, yes, I helped to put together the original developer group, but since then it's all been community developed. Most of the people working on it, if not all of them right now, are not from the original group. They are from the community, came in, loved the concept, and helped started building more on it, right? And so, yeah, we, all of our developers right now, I think, are not part of the original developer group. It's completely decentralized in every way. And if you are a developer listening right now and you are a JavaScript or Java developer, please get in touch with us. We can definitely use any more development assistance that we can get. And you're going to love being able to build on this network. Not only is it much better as far as what we've discussed, it's also much easier as a developer to build on it, which is crazy too, right?
No, it really is. And I mean, yeah, like you said, there's so much more to discuss, but I think this was such a great, like, this is like a deep, serious overview. This was not like, oh, here's your 5 minute YouTube, which is why I love this format, by the way. And that's part
Yeah.
of why, again, I mentioned you were like, oh, not no video. But it's like, yeah, because I want someone driving, running, doing their
Yeah.
dishes, cleaning
No,
their
I like
house
it.
to be like, holy shit, this is insane. It's kind of like when you listen to podcasts, you'll get some insight that like stops you in your tracks. So hopefully there was a few of those or many of those
Yeah.
in this discussion, because that's what it's all about is, oh yeah, I remember using Napster, I remember using
Right?
IRC, I remember Warez, even if it's like you weren't a techie. But that's why it was so cool. My motivation to get that video or that game, because my mom wouldn't buy it for me because it's too violent, it's like, well, too damn bad, I'm going to download it anyway. So it's sort of funny how all these like components that I've encountered earlier on have now been brought together in this really cool way. And that's the other thing about this group that I'll just mention is like, it feels very OG 90s internet vibe. Very friendly people, very smart, very honestly open-minded. There's a lot of cool discussions about like health, things that are like non-mainstream, and not, I don't say that in a bad way. It's even, I remember Google Video, like, oh my god, I loved Google Video before it got all locked down and turned into
Right.
YouTube basically. But they had almost like no adults in the room or supervision. Like the videos you could find on there, and I'm not even talking like violent or anything, crazy conspiracy stuff, like just the thoughts that were out were so different. So it kind of feels like this is that next, I hate to even use the word underground, but it's almost like the underground internet where all those people from the 90s, you're like, where the hell did they go? Oh, well, here they are. You know, they've kind of are finding new homes in these smaller subgroups. And I think that you've created, or you and those many other people have created this home for a lot of that crowd. And I mean, where does that crowd live? It's like, shoot, you know, like, where do you gather? That is kind of like that festival crowd, the go to show crowd. It's like a little bit of everyone, really. But
Yeah.
we all got spread out because of just the way, like you said, the way the world trends. Like, frankly, you know, not to tinfoil hat here, but it's like, yep, they separated us and made it a
Yep.
very specific act of isolation. So now I think, again, it's just bringing people together in a whole new way, just to simplify it. If I were to tie this whole discussion together, you're creating a way to connect with each other in a super, I think how Rice put it, a very fair way, just because of the nature of like how this whole thing was set up. And also you can contribute right away and be rewarded by, again, your time that you put in. So was there any other thoughts you'd like to share?
I mean, yeah, we didn't even touch on Qblog, which is our social media platform, Qshop, which allows you to create your own shop and sell goods and services, Brighteon, which happens to be Mike Adams, if anybody's familiar with him. We built a Q app for him, and he's got now a bunch of videos being published on QDN as well. We've got, all kinds of different websites. We've got QFund, which is an AT-powered automated decentralized crowdfunding. You can come in and get your project funded in court. We've got Earbump, which is a Spotify replacement where you got music, you make playlists, all kinds of stuff. You should be publishing your stuff there. We've got all kinds of stuff here. I just wanted to
Ooh,
say
yeah.
we touched on a lot of the base level stuff on Qortal, which is great, and I think that we definitely need to do another because there's a lot more to go into depth on. But yeah, no.
Yeah, like a feature breakdown and how are all these pieces connected. I would love to
Yeah.
even touch on a non-internet based connectivity, like your mesh network comment. Like that stuff's super fascinating because I mean, again, I follow a little bit of the
Oh
prepper
yeah.
community, and it's like this is a freaking amazing solution for stuff like that. I mean, people want to get all elaborate with their Faraday cage, this and that, and I'm like, you know what's even cooler than that? If we could just damn communicate during a time
Right.
like that. And by the way, that's also doubling, even the government would probably be cool with this.
Yep.
It's doubling as like an emergency backup network that they, by the way, use. The government, and specifically firefighting and law enforcement, they use radio. Why? Because it can't go down. Yeah, man, there's some really cool threads here that are like super concrete. We don't have to just be like theorizing here. Like this is the real deal. So I think that's what gets me also pretty excited about a lot of what I've seen. And again, I'm not even like trying to shill your project. It's just like like you said, I've encountered it and other people have encountered it and really like what's going on. And it's kind of like we know these rules. Like here's code, here's hardware, here's this game theory, blockchain stuff. It's cool because it's like we don't even need to sit around and talk about blockchain. Like I look at a lot of these conferences, like, dude,
Yep.
people are still like on the horn about, oh, blah, 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 blockchain this, blockchain that, Bitcoin this. Dude, this conversation's played out, man. Like you said, 2013, that was a similar time for me when I arrived. And yeah, it was cool to be excited about Bitcoin for a few years, but now shit's changed and gotten kind of crazy. And there needs to be like,
Yeah, and we wanted to make it easy to use. We wanted to make it so you can have one location that you can go to, and all of these things are there. You don't have to try to find where all these things are that I'm talking about. It's literally all in the same interface. So yeah, and of course that can be changed in the future, and people can build their own or whatever. But yeah,
yeah,
man, we wanted to build a community overall that helps to establish this and get it out there because we really believe that this is the only way that we'll have any sort of real freedom on the digital side.
wow. Well, man, I don't think you could have summed it up much better, but how do we get in touch with you? How do we follow your work? And, I would definitely encourage people to check out this platform and start playing with it. And, feel free to reach out to me or even you because you've been really responsive. But yeah, love to sort of have people just look at it and tell us what you think. So, yeah, how do we get in touch?
Yes, me personally, crowetic.com. I've got contact information at the bottom, which is crowetic.com. And that's also my hardware company where I've got rebuilt laptops that are already built running Qortal. I've got the Cortector that I mentioned earlier. I think maybe that was just talking to you. We didn't even cover that, but we've got that there as well. And then Qortal is Qortal.org, which is Qortal. There is no U in Qortal. And that is Qortal.org. ORG. And that website definitely needs some updates. The development of the project has been moving so quickly that we have not even had a chance to make sure that the website and even wiki.qortal.org, which I was updating before we got on this call, are updated to the point because the development just has been moving so quickly. There are a lot of things that need to be updated there, but you can definitely get the download from qortal.org. And once you get into the Qortal UI, then you can communicate there. Also, we have all the links to our Telegram and our Discord, which we do still use for now. We will be moving completely away from that as soon as all of the rest of the functionality, which we are currently moving over to, has all of the stuff that we want. And then we'll be moving completely off of that, but still having those gateways there for people to come in from the internet, I think is still helpful. But yeah, we've got that Telegram, Discord, and yeah, Qortal.org has the links to that at the top with the community link. And I think that's basically it for now, I think.
Yeah, no, dude, that's amazing. Thanks for coming on, sharing your knowledge. I'm glad we kind of just, covered fundamentals because now it's like, all right, well, here you can point to this core discussion, and now we can build on top of that all these other concepts that are definitely going to be future chats we'll definitely be having. Yeah, man, thanks again for coming on, and I'll definitely look forward to our next chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man, I'll see you in the Qortal metaverse.
For sure. JavaScript or Java developer, please